Authorities in the Northern District confirmed late this afternoon that a missing persons alert was issued after a 6-year-old girl approached a corporate executive during a community outreach event, telling her that she could not locate her father. The incident, which witnesses described as alarming and deeply emotional, took place near the forested edge behind the town's civic center, an area that has recently been the subject of multiple safety warnings due to poor visibility, unstable terrain, and reports of wildlife activity. According to early statements, the child appeared cold, frightened, and exhausted when she ran up to the visiting CO and tugged at her coat, pleading for help in a trembling voice that immediately drew the attention of volunteers and bystanders. Reporters at the scene noted that the CEO, widely known for her sharp leadership and high-profile corporate image, was visibly shaken when she knelt down to speak with the child. What followed has quickly become the center of an ongoing investigation. The girl explained that her father had taken her into the woods earlier in the day, intending to gather firewood and locate a shortcut back to their cabin. At some point, she claimed they became separated, and after wandering alone for what she described as a very long time, she saw the lights and crowd from the event and followed the sound of voices. Officials said the timeline is still being pieced together, but the emotional impact of the child's appearance was immediate. Multiple witnesses reported that she was shivering and repeatedly asking for help finding her father, emphasizing that he had never left her alone before. Emergency responders say the girl was wearing clothing inappropriate for the dropping temperatures, which suggests that the disappearance was accidental rather than planned. Medical staff who performed an initial assessment on-site confirmed that she was dehydrated but stable, and that there were signs she had been walking for hours. The CEO, who was originally scheduled to give a speech and later meet with officials about community development programs, abruptly abandoned the scheduled agenda after hearing the child's story. She was seen removing her coat and wrapping it around the girl, then issuing instructions to staff while keeping the child close at her side. The decision marked a notable shift from her typically formal demeanor, demonstrating a spontaneous and protective reaction that has already prompted wide discussion online. Authorities were quickly contacted, and the area was placed under preliminary search protocol. However, before the arrival of the full search team, the CEO reportedly began walking toward the tree line, still holding the child's hand, insisting that time was critical given the weather conditions. Sources close to her say that she lost her own spouse under circumstances involving delayed response times, and that this history may have influenced her immediate reaction. Local residents participating in the event described the moment as both urgent and strangely personal, as if the CEO had been transported out of her corporate role and into something far more instinctive. The girl, though frightened, reportedly trusted the CEO almost instantly. She clung to her and murmured details about her father, his name, the color of his jacket, the way he had joked to make her feel brave when the woods got darker. Authorities say the child's recollections will play an essential role in tracing the father's route. Her familiarity with the terrain appears limited, raising concerns that the pair may have drifted off a known trail that is marked but not consistently maintained. Officials warn that even experienced hikers have previously found themselves disoriented in that area during late autumn, especially when fog begins to roll in at dusk. As updates continued to come in, several volunteer groups began preparing to assist, but many were caught off guard when the CEO and the child started walking toward the forest before the official briefing had concluded. It is still unclear whether law enforcement attempted to stop her or simply allowed her to proceed due to the urgency of the situation. The CEO was described as calm but determined, moving with the child tucked against her side as she questioned her gently about the last place she had seen her father. One witness claimed that the CEO's voice carried a tremor, as though she herself was fighting memories while trying to keep the girl steady. Investigators say the forest floor is uneven and becomes more dangerous as night approaches. The decision to enter before the main search team arrived is being reviewed, but authorities acknowledge that the CEO's immediate response likely shortened the window between when the disappearance was reported and when active searching began. That, they say, could prove critical to the outcome. Reporters following the early updates note that the situation rapidly shifted from a corporate charity event to an unfolding emergency in a matter of minutes, and the CEO's presence at the center of it has introduced an unexpected human dimension to the ongoing coverage. Family details about the missing father remain limited at this time, though early reports suggest he is a single parent who moved to the outskirts of the district earlier this year. Neighbors have described him as hardworking and devoted to his daughter, often taking odd jobs, and walking long distances to avoid leaving her alone at home. Authorities are concerned that he may have been injured, given the steep embankments and cold winds that move unpredictably through the area. At this hour, they remain focused on tracking the father's last known location, using both the girl's testimony and thermal imaging scanners being prepared for deployment. As the situation continues to unfold, the central focus remains on the welfare of the missing man and the child who bravely sought help despite overwhelming fear. Officials urge residents to stay clear of the wooded zone unless they are part of the coordinated effort, as additional untrained searchers could complicate tracking efforts. The CEO and child are believed to be inside the forest perimeter now, accompanied by 2 responders who caught up with them moments after they entered. The community waits for the next update, hoping that the fast reaction will lead to a swift and safe resolution. Authorities and local rescue teams widen their search grid after new information brought unexpected urgency to the unfolding situation. Reports indicate that the female CEO, Charlotte Hale, remained on foot with the missing child deep inside the heavily forested area behind Ridgway County. What began as an internal company welfare concern had escalated into a developing regional emergency, as law enforcement confirmed that the terrain the child entered was not only dense, but historically associated with unpredictable wildlife movement and difficult visibility. Investigators briefed the media that survival conditions dropped significantly after nightfall, and with temperatures falling sharply at the forest line, every passing hour increased the risk for both the little girl and the CEO who followed her. Meanwhile, the company headquarters released a statement acknowledging that the missing man was in fact an employee, though not in the capacity many speculated. The man, identified as Daniel Brooks, had been contracted only part-time through a small maintenance vendor, meaning many people on the upper corporate floors had never interacted with him. That revelation triggered an internal scramble as employees questioned how someone with a young child could vanish in the surrounding woods without anyone noticing. Several workers admitted to local reporters that they had previously seen Daniel bring his daughter to work during emergencies, but none knew he lived in a cabin bordering the forest. Authorities later confirmed this location, emphasizing that his residence was isolated and roughly 30 minutes from any paved road, which explained the daughter's urgency and feared at T County Command Headquarters. Responders tried to piece together the last known movements of the missing father. A neighbor, interviewed briefly before search teams mobilized, claimed to have heard unusual noises hours earlier near the tree line, something between collapsing branches and distressed shouting, but he admitted he dismissed it as possible wind activity. The timeline raised immediate concerns about whether Daniel had suffered an injury or whether an animal encounter had forced him off his usual path. The sheriff emphasized caution, noting that recent sightings of coyotes and even a solitary mountain lion had been reported in the same area. He stated that while no direct evidence pointed to an attack, nothing could be ruled out to eye in a parallel development. Witnesses from the company parking lot provided more insight into the emotional state of the little girl, Emma. Multiple bystanders recalled seeing her running through the employee entrance, calling out for someone to help her because her father hadn't returned home. What struck them most was her determination. A child no older than 6 running alone in wintry conditions with no coat, holding a backpack pressed against her chest like a lifeline. Some onlookers admitted that they first assumed she was lost or separated from a parent, never imagining she was delivering what effectively became a plea for search and rescue intervention. Surveillance footage reviewed by investigators showed the CEO spotting the child, speaking to her briefly, and then immediately escorting her toward the building's main exit before the two were captured heading into the woods beyond the rear loading area. This level of involvement stunned employees, many of whom only ever saw Charlotte Hale through conference broadcasts or high-level meetings. Known for her intense leadership style and unbroken focus on corporate growth, this was the first time she had ever been seen abandoning her scheduled mid-workday, much less leading a physical search mission. Her decision to accompany the child was initially interpreted as a gesture of empathy, but as hours passed and updates remained scarce, commentators began highlighting the increasing risks she faced. Analysts who follow executive behavior noted that CEOs rarely intervene directly in emergencies involving employees, especially in isolated environments, making this incident both extraordinary and newsworthy. That as search teams entered the deeper sections of the forest, new difficulties emerged. The snowfall grew heavier than forecasted, burying footprints within minutes and forcing trackers to rely on broken branches, displaced leaves, and heat signature drones. Unfortunately, Drones could not penetrate the thickest parts of the canopy, limiting visibility. The sheriff informed the media that terrain maps from previous environmental surveys showed old, unmaintained hunting trails running beneath steep ravines, areas that could easily cause injury even for experienced hikers. Teams moved with caution, calling out both the father's name and the CEO's, hoping for any audible response. Back at the command staging area, Daniel's personal history began drawing widespread attention. A background check revealed that he had been a single father for nearly 5 years following the passing of his wife due to a sudden illness. Friends described him as hardworking, quiet, and deeply devoted to his daughter. They noted he often worked night shifts to afford childcare and sometimes brought Emma along during emergencies. Several expressed guilt at not realizing the severity of his recent hardships. One close acquaintance disclosed that Daniel had been struggling to maintain their remote cabin after a series of unexpected medical expenses, though he never complained publicly. Reporters recorded heartfelt comments, many expressing admiration for his commitment to raising Emma alone despite overwhelming odds. Meanwhile, weather experts issued warnings that temperatures would fall below freezing within hours. This concern was compounded by the unknown condition of Daniel, whose disappearance still lacked explanation. Officials emphasized that even minor injuries could become life-threatening in such temperatures. Paramedics prepared warming blankets, emergency stretchers, and intravenous supplies in anticipation of rapid medical intervention once the missing individuals were located. The county hospital placed its trauma unit on alert, anticipating complications from hypothermia or potential wildlife encounters. Within the forest, rescuers reported finding the first tangible clue since the search began: a small piece of fabric matching the description of Daniel's jacket caught on a branch near a narrow incline. The discovery raised the possibility that he may have slipped or attempted to climb the slope. However, it also strengthened hopes that the trail was fresh enough to follow. Rescuers radioed in the finding, prompting additional units to converge on the area while maintaining safety protocols. The sheriff acknowledged publicly that while the situation remained critical, every sign of human presence increased the likelihood of a successful recovery. As the search entered its most intense phase, attention shifted back to the CEO and the child accompanying her. No one could determine their exact location, and their lack of communication devices heightened concern. Analysts following the story noted the symbolic significance of the CEO's involvement, a powerful leader stepping away from corporate walls to protect the small child of an overlooked employee. Many humans online began labeling her actions as profoundly humane, while others questioned the company's previous lack of awareness regarding Daniel's struggles. The conversation grew broader, touching on worker welfare, the treatment of lower-wage staff, and the reality that extraordinary situations often reveal hidden connections between people who otherwise exist in separate worlds. County deputies continued pressing through worsening conditions as daylight dimmed, and though no major breakthroughs had been confirmed, the growing convergence of clues suggested that the search was approaching a critical turning point. Officials urged the public to refrain from entering the woods, stressing that uncoordinated efforts could hinder rescue progress. The sheriff concluded the latest briefing with a solemn but determined tone, stating that his team would not withdraw until they had answers, and emphasizing that the combined safety of the missing father, the child, and the CEO now stood at the center of their mission. The search that began as a hurried response to a frightened child's plea had now become a coordinated effort stretching across miles of thick woods. The female CEO, Evelyn Hart, had never imagined she would be out in the cold forests of the county, her heels sinking into damp earth, her business coat brushing against branches, her breath forming pale clouds in the air. Everything about her day had been scheduled, structured, and polished, until a trembling little girl tugged her sleeve and whispered the words that rewrote her priorities in an instant. She kept thinking about the urgency in the child's voice and the way her small fingers clung to her hand with the desperation only fear could carve into someone so young. "My daddy didn't come home," the little girl had said, and it wasn't a statement. It was a cry for help, a cry Evelyn had not ignored. Hours later, the cold had deepened, but Evelyn would not turn back. She had dispatched her team to contact local authorities, set up a basic perimeter search, and organize volunteers. But the little girl, Lily, refused to stay with anyone else. She insisted on walking beside Evelyn, even when her tiny legs trembled. Evelyn kept one hand on Lily's shoulder, both guiding and shielding her, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavier with every step they took deeper into the woods. The further they traveled, the more Evelyn understood why the child had run straight to her and not anyone else. Lily had sensed something in her, someone who would not dismiss her fear, someone who would ACT as they walked. Evelyn studied the little girl more closely. Lily's shoes were thin canvas, damp around the edges. Her jacket was worn and not nearly warm enough for the dropping temperature. Her cheeks were red from windburn, and yet she moved with small bursts of determination that made Evelyn's chest tighten. This child had walked alone through the cold to find help. That kind of courage only came from necessity. Evelyn wondered what their life was like, what circumstances had forced a young girl to run through town searching for a stranger who would listen. She wondered how long the father had been missing, and what kind of man he was for his daughter to care this fiercely. The forest gradually thickened, branches silhouetted starkly against the fading light. Evelyn adjusted her pace to match Lily's, though every instinct screamed that time was running short. She tried gently asking questions, hoping to piece together clues. Lily spoke in broken sentences, pointing in different directions, explaining that her father had gone out early that morning to gather firewood and never returned. She had waited, but the shadows in their cabin grew longer, and hunger began replacing hope. But it wasn't hunger that drove her outside, it was fear. She had found her father's hat near the tree line and small drops of blood on the snow. That was when she ran. Evelyn felt a coldness creep up her spine that had nothing to do with the weather. She realized now that this wasn't simply a case of a lost hiker. Whatever had happened to the father could be dangerous, unpredictable, and worsening with every passing minute. She squeezed Lily's hand a little tighter and told her they would find him. Not because it was a promise she was certain she could keep, but because it was a promise the child needed to hear. As the light dimmed, volunteers' flashlights began appearing farther behind them. Evelyn had insisted on walking ahead with Lily, believing the girl would be able to sense her father's direction better without a crowd around her. And she was right. At several points, Lily paused and pointed at small clues others might have missed. A snapped twig, faint footprints, a piece of torn fabric clinging to a branch. Every detail guided them deeper along a winding path carved by both desperation and instinct. Eventually, the forest floor dipped into a shallow ravine. Lily tugged Evelyn's hand urgently, pulling her toward a large fallen tree. Her breathing quickened, and Evelyn recognized instantly that the girl was no longer following memories. She was following something present. A sound, a smell, a familiarity only a child could detect. Evelyn knelt beside her and whispered that she was right there with her, no matter what they found. The cold wind stirred again, carrying with it a faint noise. At first, Evelyn thought it was just rustling leaves, but Lily froze and listened intently. Then she spoke, barely audible. "Daddy," she said. Evelyn turned sharply, adrenaline firing like electricity through her bones. She called out, her voice echoing into the hollow curve of the ravine. The volunteers behind them heard her and quickened their pace. A weak groan responded. Evelyn wasted no time. She lifted Lily into her arms and navigated down the uneven slope, ignoring the way branches scraped her hands and the ground threatened to tilt her off balance. When she reached the bottom, she saw him, a man slumped against the fallen tree, his jacket torn, his face pale, one leg twisted unnaturally. His skin had the frightening stillness of someone on the edge of losing consciousness. But when he saw his daughter, his eyes fluttered open, and a single tear slipped down his cheek. Lily wriggled out of Evelyn's arms and ran to him, sobbing so hard her small body shook. Evelyn knelt beside them, checking his injuries with careful precision. She had handled many crises in her corporate world, but nothing compared to this moment. The man murmured that he had slipped while chopping wood and fallen into the ravine, injuring his leg and hitting his head. He had drifted in and out of consciousness, hoping someone would find him before the cold claimed what strength he had left. Evelyn signaled for help, and volunteers rushed down to assist. She eased Lily aside gently so they could lift him without causing further injury, but the girl clung to her father's hand with shaking fingers. Evelyn reassured her that she would not let anything happen, and somehow Lily believed her more than anyone else. They wrapped him in emergency blankets and prepared to carry him out. Evelyn walked beside Lily, who never once let go of her father's hand. And though the night had grown darker, the sight of the man alive made the world seem brighter. By the time they reached the edge of the woods, paramedics were waiting. Evelyn stepped back, allowing them to work, but Lily refused to leave her side. She leaned against Evelyn's leg, exhausted but relieved. Evelyn placed a hand on her shoulder gently, feeling the enormity of what had happened settle over her. She had saved a life, perhaps two. But something deeper stirred within her. This wasn't the end of their connection. It felt like the beginning of a bond forged not by circumstance, but by something that defied logic. A pull that made Evelyn feel responsible, protective, and unexpectedly attached. As the ambulance doors closed and the man was taken to safety, Lily turned to Evelyn and whispered, "Thank you for finding my daddy." Authorities monitoring the unfolding situation in the northern Woodland region released further details today as the search for the missing single father intensified in both scale and urgency. What began as a child's plea inside a corporate lobby has now turned into a community-wide rescue operation involving police, park rangers, volunteer trackers, and specialized canine units. According to spokespersons, temperatures are expected to drop below freezing overnight, escalating concerns for the well-being of the man who disappeared while trying to gather firewood. Investigators stated that every hour now carries weight, and the tone across departments has shifted from cautious optimism to determined pressure as search patterns widen and new evidence emerges. Witness accounts from residents living near the forest edge confirm that the weather turned abruptly harsh the previous evening. Wind conditions intensified, snow thickened, and visibility diminished to a few meters. These reports mirror what the little girl described to the female CEO earlier, though officials refrained from confirming whether the child's recollections align exactly with the documented storms. Still, the timing raises questions about how far the father could have traveled before becoming disoriented or physically compromised. Rangers explained that even experienced hikers can lose their sense of direction quickly in such conditions, especially without proper gear or signaling equipment. The CEO, whose presence in the investigation has drawn notable attention, continued assisting search coordinators despite repeated suggestions to rest. Witnesses reported that she remained on-site throughout the night, periodically consulting with search commanders and reviewing map overlays that outlined probable travel routes. Her involvement has created a powerful public response. Social media discussions now highlight her hands-on support and compassion, contrasting the stereotype often placed on corporate figures. Observers say she has shown uncharacteristic but remarkable emotional investment, creating speculation about the nature of her connection to the missing man and his daughter. When asked directly, she declined interviews and instead reiterated that her focus was helping a child reunite with her father. Reports early this morning confirmed that search drones equipped with thermal imaging were deployed in expanded sectors of the woods. Initial passes detected several heat signatures, though investigators clarified that most belonged to wildlife rather than humans. Additional sweeps are planned as the sun rises, improving the equipment's accuracy. Meanwhile, K9 handlers say multiple scent trails were identified but lost due to drifting snow. The environment remains the primary obstacle, as snowfall overnight erased footprints, disturbed scent patterns, and created new hazards along the steep incline near the ridge. In a separate development, emergency responders discovered what appears to be a makeshift stick shelter near the border of the lower ravine. Inside, they found remnants of a small fire, partially burned wood, and traces of fabric fibers. Forensic teams are now examining the materials to determine whether they matched the missing father's clothing. Officials emphasize that discovery of the shelter does not confirm his current location, but provides an encouraging indication that he attempted survival techniques during the storm. A medical expert noted that the presence of even a temporary fire could have sustained him through critical early hours, depending on how long he remained inside the shelter before moving again. Public interest in the search surged after the girl's emotional appeal circulated across local and national news outlets. Several stations replayed footage showing her gripping the CEO's coat and begging for help. Commentators described the moment as one of the most human broadcasts of the year and commended the executive's rapid response. Support for the family has multiplied since, with residents delivering flashlights, blankets, and warm drinks to the staging area, while volunteers joined organized walking grids. One local store donated additional winter gear for search teams, explaining that the situation struck a chord with parents who imagined their own children facing such fear. Psychologists consulted by the media provided insight into the child's perspective, explaining that children under stress often recall events in fragmented details, making her guidance both valuable and challenging. Despite this, investigators credit her for describing the direction her father usually takes when collecting firewood. That information informed early search paths and prevented teams from wasting time in irrelevant sectors. Officials stated that the girl will not be interviewed further until her emotional state stabilizes, as her welfare is considered central to the operation. The female CEO, however, became a pivotal figure in interpreting the child's nonverbal cues. Witnesses claim she remained by the girl's side for hours, kneeling beside her in the cold, repeating calm questions, and piecing together the child's gestures into actionable information. Psychologists praised her patience, noting that many adults struggle to maintain composure under crisis. Observers also noted subtle indications of personal remorse on the executive's face, though its source remains unclear. Some speculate she blames herself for not acting sooner, while others suggest a deeper connection to the missing father that has yet to surface publicly. Late this afternoon, search units located a trail of disturbed snow and broken twigs leading toward the western slope. Teams descended cautiously and discovered signs of a fall, slid snow, a patch of blood, and imprints consistent with a human attempting to stand. Authorities have not confirmed whether these traces belong to the missing man, but they did widen the area around the slope as a precaution. Medical officials briefed the press, warning that injuries combined with exposure could significantly reduce survival time. Still, they stressed that the presence of movement marks suggests determination and mobility, both hopeful indicators. Meanwhile, community members continued gathering at the staging point offering help, bringing food for volunteers, heating packets, and handwritten messages of encouragement. The girl has stayed inside a warmed medical van, accompanied by trauma specialists and, reportedly, the CEO, who has refused to leave her side. Their relationship has become a focal point of heartwarming coverage, with commentators calling it the unlikely bond driving the search forward. Investigators have now confirmed that new tracking teams are pushing deeper into the northern ravine, an area previously considered too dangerous due to ice-covered boulders and unstable footing. The decision follows updated mapping from helicopter crews who identified unusual indentations along a cluster of trees. Authorities report that these indentations may represent handholds or attempts to break a fall. Additional rope-equipped rescue specialists are now navigating the terrain as night approaches again. Officials insist they are not stopping the operation. Portable floodlights, thermal drones, and additional trackers are scheduled to work through the dark. A spokesperson said the mission has shifted from a procedural search to a deeply human commitment fueled by the girl's trust and the CEO's refusal to abandon hope. The community waits anxiously for the next update, aware that the outcome of the coming hours may determine whether the missing father survives the ordeal. Authorities and community members have continued to reflect on the extraordinary chain of events that unfolded after the little girl led the female CEO deep into the wooded area searching for her missing father. The aftermath has been described as a turning point not only for the family involved, but also for the CEO, who has since spoken publicly about how the experience fundamentally shifted her understanding of responsibility, compassion, and leadership. The final details released by investigators and those close to the family confirm that what began as a frightening disappearance has become an unexpected source of unity and healing. Reports from medical officials indicate that the girl's father, who had been found unconscious in the woods due to a sudden medical collapse, is recovering steadily after receiving timely treatment. Doctors emphasize that the rapid intervention made by the CEO and emergency responders likely prevented a far more tragic outcome. Officers in charge of the rescue explained that the father had been exposed to dangerously low temperatures and was moments away from losing consciousness permanently when they located him. The girl's determination and the CEO's refusal to give up searching are being credited as the decisive factors that saved his life. Neighbors and community volunteers who had joined the search have expressed admiration for the CEO's commitment, noting that she never once left the child's side from the moment the girl asked for help. Witnesses remarked that despite her reputation for being strictly business-focused, the CEO's actions that night revealed a different side of her, one marked by instinctive protectiveness and genuine concern. Several employees at her company told reporters that the event has inspired broader discussions about workplace culture, empathy, and what it means to support families facing hardship. New information also confirms that the father's medical emergency was caused by prolonged stress, exhaustion, and untreated health issues stemming from his role as a single parent managing difficult work conditions. Social support workers revealed that he had been working multiple jobs to provide for his daughter and had recently been facing housing insecurity. The CEO, upon learning these details, reportedly spent significant time at the hospital advocating for him. ensuring that the family would not be burdened with the immediate costs of emergency treatment. Hospital staff described her involvement as unusually hands-on for someone in her position, emphasizing that she insisted on personally walking the little girl through each step of her father's recovery. Company insiders have shared that the CEO has already initiated internal reviews aimed at expanding childcare assistance programs, financial stability support, and emergency leave options for lower-income employees. Sources close to her say the emotional impact of being trusted by a frightened child changed her perspective on the hidden challenges many families endure. The girl has reportedly formed a strong attachment to the CEO since the incident, often asking nurses if she could see the lady who helped save Daddy. According to staff, the CEO has visited daily, bringing small gifts, reading stories, and reassuring the girl that she would not have to face the world alone. The father, upon regaining full consciousness, expressed disbelief and gratitude when he learned what had happened. Witnesses describe him becoming emotional as he realized that his daughter had shown extraordinary courage and that the CEO, someone he had only known briefly, had taken risks and responsibilities far beyond what anyone expected. His first public statement highlighted his gratitude for the stranger who treated my daughter like family at the exact moment we needed it. As the community continues to respond to the story, local organizations have stepped forward offering assistance, recognizing the challenges faced by single parents, especially those balancing financial hardship and childcare demands. A fundraising campaign to support the father and daughter has quickly gained traction, and the CEO has anonymously matched all donations made within the first 24 hours. Though she refused to comment publicly on these gestures, close associates say her actions reflect a deeper personal commitment sparked by the life-altering encounter in the woods. In closing updates, the girl has reportedly asked her father if they can invite the CEO to visit their home once he is discharged. Hospital staff say the CEO smiled with visible emotion when told of the request and responded simply, "I'll be there." Reporters covering the story note that her voice sounded softer than it ever has at press briefings, signaling that an unexpected bond has formed, one built not on corporate hierarchies but on human connection forged in a moment of fear, trust, and hope.